value annotation. So what is the purpose of value annotation? To initialize values, right? To initialize values to properties of class. Especially properties in the sense when you want to initialize string or wrapper classes, all these properties. So to initialize those property values, we are using @value annotation. So by using @value annotation, we can assign directly value to the variables, or we can do by using @value annotation, what we can do, whatever the properties you configured in the application.properties file, those are also we can get it from the application.properties and we can initialize it to the properties of the component class or not. Right? So, and one more thing, assume @value is going to work in case if you are not making this as a component. @value you given on top of @id. Okay. And this class is not a bean class, or this class is not a bean class finally. So then your value is going to be injected here. Whatever the value you configured based on the @value, like you given placeholder like this. So is it going to be initialized? No. So it's all around again Spring Bean objects level only. Okay. So now when we created component objects, when we are creating bean objects from the component classes, so can we initialize the real values to a properties or not? Yes, by using @value annotation, we can inject values into our string or wrapper objects, all these things. So when you want to load predefined properties, properties configured inside the properties file from the value annotation, what is the syntax we have? The placeholder is all about inside the double quotes. We have to take $ followed by the curly braces, and inside that what you have to define? Yes, key name, what we defined inside the properties file. So that whenever Spring Boot is loading and whenever it is trying to create respective bean objects, it will verify this key is available inside the properties file or not. So if available, that value will be injected. Okay, so this is all we completed yesterday. It's a straightforward only. And let's make a concept, Spring Bean life cycle of a Spring Bean or else. Yeah, okay. Spring Bean life cycle or else life cycle of a life cycle of a Spring Bean object. Both are same. So this is also, reality application development point of view, very rare case we will use, but interview point of view, couple of times we will get these questions. But anyway, we have to understand how things are happening internally when a Spring Bean object is created and destroyed. In between creation and in between destroyed, things what is happening. And if you want to modify the life cycle of the Spring Bean, okay, so that is all about the concept of life cycle of a Spring Bean object. So generally, what is the meaning of life cycle? Birth to death, right? So it's all about generally life cycle in the sense. Okay, so the span between birth to death is just generally considering as a life cycle. So now here Spring Bean object life cycle in the sense. Okay, now guess what is the Bean object life cycle? So in Java terminology, tell me. If it is human life cycle, you can say like birth to death. But when it comes to Java terminology, when it comes to object terminology, so can we say like initialization to object initialization to object destructor. Okay, so I'm just making a simple statement here. Okay, so that means the concept here it is whenever we are creating Spring Bean objects, okay, whether it is a component, maybe at the rate bean method, whatever it is. So generally we are creating so many bean objects for every bean class, okay, inside the container level. Now, whenever container creating bean object for any class, so internally it is following couple of steps and those steps are calling it as a life cycle of a bean method, bean object. So that means generally what is the approaches we followed to create the bean object? Think in the Spring Core module point of view, or maybe from the step creating the container object. Generally, what we will do, we will define bean classes, right? And then before creating the bean objects, what we will create? Yes, we will just taking consideration into the container. So that means it's all called as Spring application context. Okay. So creating container. So as part of this, what we are doing? Providing bean classes to application context or not? That means container. So how you are passing information is, that's a different story. Maybe you can pass XML or you are passing by using annotations also. So finally, we are providing bean classes to the container level. Now what container will do internally? Container is getting started creating bean objects. So it's going to get creating the bean objects. But in the process of creating bean objects, okay, there are couple of life cycle steps are available. That is, with respect to bean object, I am talking now. Individual bean object. Okay, what are the steps here? It is internally how it is following. Creating instance of bean class. So creating instance of bean class is nothing but bean object. And immediately, internally, container is verifying, is there any method called as bean initialization method? So that means, what are the points we have to understand here? It is, generally every bean object, whenever we are creating any bean object, so there are some couple of steps is followed called as initialization. So that means, can I consider it as a birth? Bean object point of view, initialization in the sense created an object. So it's all birth. Now once the bean object is created, so as per Spring Bean or as per Spring framework, we have a steps called as, okay, creating or else. Okay, now immediately Spring framework is saying, in case if you have any requirement, whenever a bean object is created, if you want to execute a logic immediately. So what is the point here? It is, once bean object is created by the container and a logic has to be executed immediately. Immediately in the sense, followed by object creation. If you want to execute any logic, so Spring framework provided a concept called as, okay, so initialization method. So now finally, Spring Bean object is ready. So that means I will come back here. So here, what is the point of initialization method is, by default, we are not providing any initialization methods. Okay, nothing will be executed. It will verify any life cycle method is provided after bean object is created, or we provided any initialization method which has to be executed always only once, that too when the bean object is created immediately, initialization method, some logic has to be executed. For that, we can define a initialization method. So this is calling as life cycle method. And how many times it is going to be executed? Only one time. And when it will be executed? So is it like, are we going to call manually? No, container is going to call that method which we defined as part of the bean class. And at what time container will call? Is it going to call every time? No, whenever container is creating the bean object, so then it will call the respective life cycle method, and we are calling it as a bean initialization method. Okay, bean initialization method. So only one time called, executed by container, initiated by container, followed by object creation. So in this space, okay, in this process, if you are provided any initialization methods, then it will execute. If you are not provided, then it will feel like nothing has to execute it as part of the life cycle phase initialization point of view. So nothing will be executed. In case if you are not provided life cycle method of bean. Now finally Spring Bean object is ready for use. Ready for use in the sense what's happening. So earlier as of now, whenever we discussed, I never ever discussed about this point. Generally what I used to say, a bean object will be created by the container and we are going to use that bean object from the container. This is what we discussed. But in between these two steps, now as part of bean life cycle, what is the one more step is internally Spring is performing always initialization method. It is called as life cycle method of a bean object. So what it is doing internally, that means, so that method will be executed always by the container once object is created. So step number 1, object is created. And then step number 2, initialization method is executed. And finally your bean object is ready to use. Okay. So in case if you are not, as of now, are we written any initialization methods earlier? We never ever written anything. We don't know also. So that means container will verify internally these developers provided any life cycle method, okay, which is treating as an initialization method or configuration of the bean data, something like that. It will verify. If you are provided, then that method will be executed by the container. And then finally your object is ready to use. And then finally your Spring Bean object is ready to use. In the sense you can get whatever the bean object you are getting from the container, by the time it's already created and it is executed the logic, what we are provided as part of the initialization method. Now this is what happens. So generally when this will happen, application context is created. That means container is created, right? This is all process is going to happen when once container is created, container is going to create every bean object, right? So you guys are getting the points here. I'll tell you what is the importance of this step. Okay, that's what I told you. In reality, programming point of view, application development time, very rare case we will use these scenarios. Very, very rare case. But interview point of view, we need these points, okay? And even internal point of view also. Now finally, your Spring Bean object is ready to use. And once your application is executed everything and finally, generally what is happening? In the somewhere else, our application getting terminated or not? Application execution getting terminated. What is the meaning of application executing getting terminated? So generally what's happening? For example, if you go to the, so this is a Spring Boot application. So what is the meaning of application getting terminated here? So see here. So run as Java application. So your entire logic will be executed at the end of main method. Your application is getting terminated or not. So that means JVM process is getting terminated or not. That's the process here it is. So that means now in general, as per our garbage collection or whatever you understood on high level. So once your application is terminated in the sense, the memory is going to be free up or not in the JVM memory or RAM memory level, right? So same kind of steps here also. Now once application is ready to use, okay, you can use your bean objects now. Now your bean objects are ready to use and you are using all the bean objects. Generally, and again, when we are closing the application context, nothing but container, okay, immediately. So do you know servlet lifecycle methods? What are those? Init method, service, destroy. When init, how many times init method will be called? Only first time you are sending the request for the servlet, maybe you initiated some load on startup or whatever it is. Question here it is, how many times init method will be executed whenever you are sending request for the same servlet? Only one time whenever you are sending request for the first time, or whenever servlet object is getting created for the first time, then init method will be executed, right? For example, you given load on startup something 1, 2, 3, like, so then generally the purpose of init method is what? What is the full word for the init here? Initialization. Same concept they are also taking here. You guys remembering or not? It looks like servlet or not. So when servlet object is created, then only init method will be called and init method will be executed. After that, you are sending request for 1,000 times for the same servlet. The init method is going to call? No. That means only one time. So, but why you are writing init method in the servlets? Some data, whatever you want to configure as part of that servlet object, and that you want to use always as part of your service method level. So in future purpose, whatever the data dynamically you want to assign, so that data you are using, you are initializing as part of the init method. Some properties you have, so those values you have to initialize when servlet object is created. Then what is the solution comes into our mind? You have data, you have some variables, instance variables, let's take like that. And you have to initialize those instance variables with some values. Okay, for the servlet object point of view. Then where you will write down that logic, and that the data has to be assigned only once. Then where you will write down? Init method. So whatever logic you written in the init method, so whenever you created object for the servlet object, whenever servlet object is created for the first time, the data is going to be initialized, whatever you written as part of the init method or not. Now the data, can you access from the service method? Yes, obviously instance variables you can access from any instance method, right? So you can access from the service methods. Now guess it is same or not? So in this place, application context in the sense, their servlet container. See here, Spring container is nothing but their servlet container or web container. We will call it a servlet container also. Okay, web container or servlet container. Creating servlet object, calling the init method. Then you are executing every time. Servlet in the sense service method, you are sending all that means you are utilizing the servlet object every time whenever you are sending the request. Now, in the same servlets, when destroy method will be called? How many times destroy method will be called? Only one time. When? The default, by default, when destroy method will be called? When you are stopping the container. That means Tomcat server. That means internally you are stopping web container, right? You are stopping or you are closing the web container. Then all servlets destroy methods will be called or not? So whatever the, for example, we have not written any destroy method. So internally, servlet container is calling a destroy method or not? So do you know the servlet interface lifecycle methods? How many methods? 5 methods. So destroy is a abstract method, right? So that means when you define your servlet from the HTTP servlet, even though we have not written our own destroy method, by using some polymorphism concept in the background, the destroy method will be available or not? So that destroy method is calling by default by the servlet container. How many times again? Only one time. When you are closing the container, when you are stopping the Tomcat server, when you are closing the servlet container, whatever we can say, but at the time servlet is getting, the destroy method is called. So what is the purpose of executing destroy method with respect to the servlet? Okay, they given it is executing only one time, but what is the purpose? See, whatever you did in the initialization level, you have to free up now. You initialized something at initialization method level to use the servlet object. Now your usage is completed. Okay, your usage is completed. Now you are leaving or you are just closing everything. Then you have to release whatever you initialized at the init method level. So those kind of things generally we will write down inside the destroy method, like cleanup activities. Generally, we can call it as cleanup activities in the sense closing the connections or closing any IO streams if you are opening anything as part of servlets, resources, whatever it is. So you are just again, whatever you initialize at the init method, you are just releasing from the destroy method. So now guess, is it 100% copy paste concept or not? 100%, is even not even 99. Same thing here also. That's all. Whenever you are learning any concept, don't feel like whether it is useful today or not. It may useful in another way, another concept level. Okay, people whoever is having. So anyone of you got an idea before I am bringing servlet concept into this example? Whenever I am saying like container is created, bean object is created, bean initialization method, life cycle method only one time executed. Frankly, tell me how many of people you got in your mind. It is somewhat related to servlets topic. So only one person I can see. So that's what the importance of revising what? Old concepts. Keeping every day, just keep your brain on always with old concepts. Then learning new concepts is very easy. So who knows the servlets very well? This is just like 1 minute discussion for them. Okay, good. Even online people also. Thank you. So that's all. Please make sure always your knowledge is strong in the old point of view. Old concepts, whatever you have. So same thing. Now tell me, when we are closing the application context in a sense, it's nothing but if you are comparing with the container, servlet container or web container. So what it is going to, even here also these guys are involving one more method called as destroy destruction method, I can call it as. This will be executed. This will be executed only once at the time of when? At the time of object. Sorry. At the time of application context is getting closed. So that means simply maybe it is terminating once your logic is executed, or manually also we can close the application context. Okay, there is a predefined, there is a method available, close method available. We can call close method. So whenever closing in the sense, what you are closing here, you are closing the IOC container. That means you are stopping the IOC container. So whenever IOC container is stopping, that means assume here lot of bean objects available now, which are okay. So something object 1, object 2, something you have bean object 1, bean object 2 and bean object 3. And these are all, assume you define life cycle method of initialization point of view. How many times this logic will be executed? Only one time, when bean object is created, and when bean objects will be created before IOC container creation or after IOC container creation. Once IOC container is ready, then it will take one by one bean objects and it will start creating the bean objects and it will process the life cycle methods if you have defined anything. Similarly now, as part of life cycle point of view, same thing, whenever you are closing the container, so every bean object, the destroy method of every bean object will be called. So similarly, however you have initialization method for every bean class, similarly, can we have a destroy method or not? Same thing, like when you return 10 servlets, every servlet will have its own init method and destroy methods. So is it mandatory like we are writing destroy and inits in servlets also? When you are writing, is it mandatory when you are writing HTTP servlets point of view? No, right? So that means they abstracted by using HTTP servlets. Similarly here also, it's up to our choice. When your logic has to be executed, some data has to be initialized. Once your bean object is ready, then what you have to do? What is the solution you have to get into your mind? You have to use Spring Bean lifecycle methods. So if you have a requirement, a logic has to be executed always when bean object is created. Okay, when bean object is created. So then what you can do? You can write down that logic inside the init method. Okay, so let me show you one or two examples in this point. Okay, so this is what the overall life cycle, even high level point of view. What is the first point? Creating the bean object. So yes, bean object will be created by default. So that means created by the container. Now immediately what it will do? Configuration. Configuration in the sense executing the initialization method, the bean lifecycle method, we are calling it as initialization, bean initialization methods. Whatever we are going to write down, those methods will be executed. That comes under the bean configuration. Now what is the meaning of utilization? Now it's ready to utilize. Now you can get bean objects from the container. So container is performing always creation and configuration when you are starting the container. So immediately internal it is creating bean object and it is configuring the bean object if you return any logics. And then finally when destruction will be happen, the bean object is going to be destroyed At what time? When you are closing the container, every bean object destroy method will be called. Every bean object will be destroyed. Nothing but whatever you initialize in the configuration level, so that will be destroyed in the, that means you are closing, for example, database connection. You know the JDBC, right? So you know one thumb rule, we have to close always database connections. Once your query is executed, we have to close always DB connections. Now guess, I'm just taking a simple example point of view to understand. So assume you, by the time bean object is created here, you return opening the connection. Once your logic is executed, you want to close the bean object. So that kind of things, it's not exactly related to what, getting the DB connections. But I can say something, in JDBC level, you have a concept internally comes connection pool point of view, those things will coming into the picture. Okay, so let me write down one small example, then you will understand very easily instead of talking more. Now this concept, this life cycle of bean objects is related to Spring or Spring Boot. It's Spring actually. Same concept like servlets only. See, even the IOC container application context, this is also a concept somewhat related to servlet web container or not. Who creating servlets objects as a developer are we else? This is already I told you in the days of demo level. Are we ever creating servlets objects, something like user servlet equal to new user servlet, something like that? We never ever write down single time creating servlet objects by the development time, right? Who creating those things? Web container is creating. How it is creating? Is it simply creating? Are we written any web XML configuration or are you using any annotations? You are using some XML configuration, servlet name, URL patterns, all these things. Based on that, your servlet class will be loaded by the container. Container is going to create object for the servlet class. And if you written any init method will be executed for the first time. Then next time onwards, whenever you are sending a request, immediately service method will be called. And when destroy method will be called? When you are closing the container. So this is all concepts related to Spring container or not. Now if you copy paste, it's almost same copy paste concept. Okay, so I'm just writing very quickly. I'm writing a 1 or 2 bean classes. I'll write down. Okay, so now we are defining what? Lifecycle methods inside the bean class. So that whatever we define now as part of lifecycle methods. So how many lifecycle methods manually we are defining as part of bean class now? 2 we are defining. So one is init method, initialization, and one more is destroy method. We are going to make sure for every bean class or every bean object pointer. So how to define? Let's see here step by step. So first let me write down our basic steps. Okay, see here what I'm just created a order class. I written a simple constructor. I'm not writing the properties. Okay, properties and all, you know that dependency injection. That's a common step. Only thing is lifecycle methods point of view we are discussing now. I will define the methods. Okay. So as of now, I did not define anything. So here, context dot get bean of, yes, order dot class. First we will see what we know. Then we will, on top of that, we will understand the concept. Order instance you will get. Okay, so this is what our container reference or not context. Now generally there is a method. I mean we are not used as of now. Context dot close. So when you are using close method in the sense what you are trying to do here, closing what? Yes, closing the container, stopping the container. Or I will write down this one. Spring context is getting closed. Okay, so see here now, we know the concepts as of now. So whenever this line is executed, generally what will happen internally? It will scan component classes. It will create bean objects. Whatever you written, bean methods, component classes and everything, right? So now after that, you are getting bean object of order from the container and you are using it and you are just using it, whatever the purpose you got it. And finally, you are closing the connection. So let's see here. Spring context is getting ready in the sense at main method level, first line I written this. So that means internally the entire Spring Boot logic is implemented, whatever the run method they written here and everything. So now what is this? Order bean object is created. Even we know this. We know this. Now if you observe here, what is this? You got the bean object of order from the container. So that means I will write down one more statement here. Okay. So just same example. Order object is created. Okay. This is the order object. You got it. And you are utilizing the order object, whatever available inside the container or not. Yes. Even you can set some values. You can get values. You can do whatever you want. So that means I will write on that one also. Utilization point of view, I'm just talking. Order dot. Okay. I don't have any properties, right? Let me write down one or two properties. Okay. Order dot set order ID. You are setting 111. Okay. So simple. Just to make sure I'm saying like the order object, whatever we received from the container, we are using it for some of the logic execution and finally we are closing the connection. So that is all I just written here. Spring context is getting ready. Order object is created and you utilize the order object, that is fine. Spring context is getting closed and spring context is closed. So that's fine. These are all we know that. Now let's define bean life cycle methods for the bean class called as order. So how to define bean life cycle methods which has to be executed once the order object is created. So that means now whatever the logic I'm going to write down as part of the initialization bean life cycle method. So when that will be executed after this line or before this line or after these lines. So immediately after order bean object is created and before these lines. So these three lines representing what? Okay, I'll just simplify it. If you written Spring, you will not get this images. I mean, these things and all. Even you can practice this example in Spring also. Same copy paste. Only project setup is different. Now, generally, you are making container is ready. Order bean object is created. Now tell me, with respect to bean life cycle of initialization, what is the point I told you when it will be executed? After bean object is created, immediately the life cycle method is called by the whom? Container internally. So then, whatever the logic we are going to write down as part of init method, you are going to see before 1850 or after 1850 or after these lines. Yes, after 1850, we have to see something has to be done by default by the container in this specific scenario. So let's see how to define now. That's fine. Okay, we got the concept. How to define is we can define in two ways. Bean lifecycle methods. We can define in two ways. One is by using interfaces. Second one is by using annotations. By using annotations. So either of the way, we can implement the what we are defining here. Bean lifecycle methods. So now how many bean lifecycle methods we have overall? Yes, two. One is initialization point of view. Second one is destroy point of view. So two ways we can define. Okay. So by using interfaces, first we will see, and then we will see second option also annotation. So whatever comfortable for us, you can use that option when you are defining the bean lifecycle method. Even in XML also, I will give you an idea. Okay, what you have to do in the XML, you just make it as your practice or assignment point of view. You just create one XML example and just make sure. I will give you what you have to do. You just implement in your practice. Yeah, Ravi, you can teach me then, okay? So if you know the things, just keep quiet. Okay. When you know everything, why you join the training then? See, it's just like distraction. People are giving answers. I know when you know why you join the training there. So it's simply is giving answers. As of now, I never ever used a word called as implementing interfaces and all. People are giving the answers. If you know, keep quiet. Just try to understand whatever you're understanding, what you know already, and whatever I'm explaining, both are matching or not. Okay, like that you just need to think. But don't become proactive when the concepts are which are not discussed. When I'm asking about old things, then if you are giving answers, definitely I will appreciate everyone. So if it is annotations, what we have to do is every bean class has to be implement predefined annotations for initialization and destroy method point of view. So predefined annotation, and who has to implement? That respective bean class has to be implement those annotations. Okay, so what are those annotations? Here it is. I forgot the annotation. I remember the annotation names. I forgot the. Yeah, one is disposable bean. So it's disposable in the sense disposing the bean object. Initialization, I forgot the name. I'm post pre-destroy, post construction, post. I'll give you the name. I think initializing bean. Okay. Yeah. So generally, you know the concepts. What is the meaning of interfaces in Java? We will define abstract methods, and whoever is implementing those interfaces, so you have to provide logic for the abstract methods. Now let me add unimplemented methods here. Okay, so now guess this interface is responsible for the name itself telling. What is the meaning of it is? Initializing bean is the interface. Okay, so and how many initialization bean methods I told you? Only one method we are going to consider always as a bean life cycle method with respect to initialization point of view. So now guess how many abstract methods they might have given as part of this interface? Yes, obviously one, only one. Okay. So now similarly, what is the another interface name? Disposable bean. And here also, this is the purpose of, this is also interface. So this is the purpose of destroying the bean object, disposing the bean object when container is getting closed. So here also, how many methods can be defined like that I told? Only one destroy method we will have. So how many abstract methods we can expect from this interface now? Only one abstract method we can expect from this. Now see here. So how many methods finally we are added in the here? So one is destroy, one is after properties set. Now guess after properties set, abstract method belongs to which interface? Initializing the bean. So destroy method is belongs to disposable bean here. So see if I keeping initializing only, then this method is saying like it's not overriding method. So this method destroy method belongs to the disposable bean, and after property set method is belongs to the initializing bean method. Okay, so now let's write down some statements here. Sys out inside bean life cycle method. Okay, so initialization. Now tell me when this after property set method will be called. Once bean object is created, that means assume a constructor will be executed for the order or not, based on our component point of view. Immediately, internally, this after property set method will be called as a lifecycle bean method. As a developer, are we calling this method manually from anywhere else? No, that's the point you have to remember here. This lifecycle method is automatically called by the container once this bean object is created. Okay. And similarly, destroy method also called at what time? When application is going to be terminated, when we are closing the application context, in the sense closing the container. It's interview point of view, very important question. That's why we are discussing. Okay, let me execute and see the output from previous and right now. Okay, so let's copy paste again. Okay, so see here now, same thing. Order object is created. Now guess when the life cycle method is executed immediately after object is created. So is it true or not? Inside bean life cycle method, initialization after property set. After property set is a method of bean life cycle method, like for the purpose of what? Initialization, some data with respect to object point of view. So for example, yeah, I'll come back anyway. So understand now what you did until these 3 lines. You are utilizing the bean object, whatever created for the order. So now, what is the point here? It is we are closing the container. So before closing the container, so what happened? Which method is called? Destroy method is automatically called or not when you are closing the constructor. So let's do one thing. Sorry, not constructor, container. So I just commented the close method on top of container level. So just understand here again. So Spring context is closed and inside the dispose destroy. So what is the point I would like to prove here? It is when your termination, your execution is terminated, in the sense automatically container is going to be closed or not, even though you are not written here. So once JVM process is completed, execution is completed, your container is also going to be destroyed or not. So that's why even at that time also, your destroy method is called or not, disposable method. So this is how the life cycle methods will be executed in a bean class whenever a new bean object is initialized. So now my point here it is, assume I'm writing private string I'm writing setter getter for this. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Right. Okay, whatever it is. So now tell me what is going to happen in this case. By the time your order object is ready, what is the value you will see in the company name now? Okay, so let's execute now. So what is this name? Flipkart is the name. So where you set this value? How this value is injected inside the property of company name. This time are you used any at the rate value? So then how it is injected? You use a life cycle method called as after property set, and as part of that what you did? You initialized the company name value as a Flipkart inside the after property set. So then automatically your instance variable value is becoming as Flipkart for the company name property. So that's what the advantage of the lifecycle methods. The advantage of the lifecycle methods. So for example, in interviews, if they're asking, I want to set values for the properties of a component class or bean class by default, then how many ways you have now? Tell me. In annotations point, how many ways we have? What are the possible ways tell me now? One is at the rate value. Okay, let's talk about only component class point of view. I have a component class. I have to initialize values to the instance variables. How many ways I can initialize or inject the values by default whenever a bean object is created for the component class? Till yesterday, how many options? One option at the rate value. Now, in case another option, what we have? Properties set method. Bean life cycle method, initialization method can be used or not. So it's behaving as at the rate value or not. So whatever you configured as part of here. But only thing is, at the rate value is a good approach or this is a good approach? Yes, at the rate value is a good approach. The reason is, here the things you can configure something in the properties and those values you can directly access here. Tomorrow if you are using same property, same company name value in hundreds of classes, everywhere it is Flipkart. So if you want to modify the name again, if you are keeping it properties, it's only one place and that is automatically reflecting wherever you are using at the rate value. But if you are using like this, then you have to go every class, every method, every line you have to modify, you have to spend a lot of time. So that's what different ways we will have. That's why I told you. In real-time application development point of view, even I never ever written any build life cycle methods. Very rare case, but interview point of view, people will ask. Now that's fine. I'm going to create one more configuration class. Okay, I'm creating a configuration class. And I'm creating bean object for the order class. One more bean object. Okay. So now, if I executed my logic, how many times after property set method will be executed and destroy method will be executed once I'm executing this? How many times after property set method will be executed as well as the destroy method will be executed based on my entire current source code? How many bean objects are creating? 2 bean objects are created. Then how many times after properties will be called? 2 times. 1 bean object creation, 1 time property set. Second bean object creation, second time also for that respective second bean object, again after property set method will be called. Okay, here because of 2. Okay, good. So anyway, let me execute now. You got the problem, right? It's all more than one object. Okay, see here now. How many times after property set is called? 2 times. Why? 2 bean objects are created. So that's the point I told you here. So bean, when it will be called? Only one time executed by the container followed by object creation. So if you created 1000 objects for the same bean class, so the same after properties set method from the same class will be executed how many times? 1000 times. Similarly, if you return dispose method, destroy method also, how many times it will be called again? Yes, whenever you are closing the container, it is going to destroy all 1000 bean objects. Then every time every destroy method will be, every time the same destroy method will be called for every particular bean object or not. So that is what you can see here. So destroy method is called 2 times. Now same behavior can we see for other bean classes or not? So if you return any product classes or whatever the bean classes going further you are writing. So if you are added any life cycle methods, so life cycle methods are going to be executed always by the whom? And container is going to execute. At what time it is executing? While object is created after property set, initialization method. When container is going to be closed, okay, then destroy methods will be called before destroying the bean object. Before destroying the bean object, destroy method is going to call. Okay, that's the point here it is. Okay. So same, you just try with couple of classes, create 1 or 2 bean classes, another bean classes also, just practice this example. Okay. So this is all about with respect to interfaces. But if you want to use annotations, see the whatever I discussed as of now, in the background, technically how many times executed, same stuff. Only thing is in place of interfaces, what you are using? Annotations you are using. So if you are using annotations, it's very simple. Even you don't need to use interfaces and everything. By using annotations, what we can do is, step number 1, we can define methods. Okay, we can define methods with any name. We can define methods with any name, and those methods we are going to annotate, okay, based on initialization and a destroy point of dispose. So only thing is what they are saying, just define your own methods, okay, and make sure whatever the method you written for the initialization, annotate that method with some annotation, and whatever the method you written for the disposable point of view, just annotate that method with an annotation given by the Spring framework. So what are those annotations? At the rate post constructor, post construct. And second one is pre-destroy. Okay. Now which annotation is responsible for initialization, which is for the destroy? The names itself telling. Post construct in the sense, what is the meaning of post construct? That's what. After constructing the object, this method has to be executed. After, post in the sense after constructing the object. So it's all about initialization. So it's all about destruction. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm not taking much. I'm just taking product class at the rate component. Okay, so what I will do, so this is the purpose I'm always writing sysouts in the default constructor. Then you will understand the background flow. Even though if you are not written, our code is going to work or not. It works, but only thing is it's giving a lot of understanding at what time which step is happening. That's why I try to add a lot of sysouts when you are practicing. Okay, I'm not taking much properties here. You just initialize properties and all. So I'm writing, now observe here generally, only thing is the way how they define abstract methods, zero parameters and void return types, right? Similarly, you have to define void methods with zero method arguments and all. But you can give method names wise, what are the method names you have to give? You can give any method name. Public, void, okay. Configure data and method arguments 0. So here is sort of this is acting as being initialization lifecycle method. So I'm just little bit weak in spelling mistakes. Okay, when you are considering spelling mistake, don't consider. Okay, so just concentrate on the subject. You can give any names here. Whatever the names I'm not writing, those are not just like predefined. You can give any name. ABC, XYZ also you can give. This is acting as being disposed. Okay, fine. So what are the annotations you have now? Yes, post constructor. Very simple. I mean, they simplified the process of using the interfaces. Instead of defining two interfaces, overriding the methods and all, they just made it as a shortcut. Post construct and pre destroy. Okay, pre destroy. So what is this? Product is created. This is acting as a bean lifecycle method. So where I written this statement? Inside the product class. That means my intention is this method is acting as a, working as a initialization, bean lifecycle initialization method. So why it is behaving, why acting as a lifecycle method? Because we given annotation here. Now what container is doing? Container is searching, these guys are written any methods which are dealing with the lifecycle called as post construct and feed destroy methods or not. Are we written or not? So then once bean object is created, immediately this method is called. Now similarly, whenever container is going to be created, closed, so this method is going to be called or not? So is it called? This is acting as a bean destroy life cycle method. So see here, every bean life cycle methods are called or not, whether it is a order or product, whatever you define life cycle methods for any bean class, everything is executed by the container, while initialization, while destroying the life cycle methods will be executed. So is it clear now with respect to annotations? It's a just like shortcut solution with respect to interfaces. Even you can give here any names, ABC, XYZ also, it will work. Only matter is the annotation what you given, that is considering as a life cycle method. Okay, so any doubts until life cycle methods? Now, right, what you have to do, I'll tell you. It's up to your wish whether you will practice or not, but I will give you an idea. There are, in XML generally, how you will create the bean objects? XML configuration. Then leave about the annotations. Only XML. What is the tag we will use? Bean tag. So in the bean tag, you will have an attribute called as init method attribute. What is that? Init method. Is it what? Tag or attribute? Attribute. So attribute means wherever you are creating something like bean ID, product, class, product, space, then what is the bean ID? Sorry, what is the attribute you have to give? Init method. So now define any method again. Okay. For example, you define ABC method inside your product class. And whenever you are configuring product bean ID, so what you have to do? Init method and equal to what is the value you have to pass? ABC. That's all. Similarly, one more attribute, destroy method. One more attribute called as destroy method is the attribute. Okay, this it's there in it. Material also, I think. Okay, you just verify. If you written XYZ and only thing is inside the bean class. Now, for example, you configure this in the XML file. Even I can create one bean XML file immediately. Now, what you have to do? Configure data is all about init method level. In space, you will give one more attribute, destroy method. And then what is the method name you will give? Remove config method. So that means you are telling to the container, consider this method as a initialization method, consider this method as a destroy method with the attributes you given in the XML bean ID configuration level. Okay. So that is how you have to do that. So you just try this. Okay, so that's all about the life cycle methods of a bean object. So it's an important interview point of view, definitely. So, but when it comes to application development, very rare case we will use, but we should know the functionality. In the background, what is happening, like if you are forgetting like servlet point of view, then this may help you in somewhere else, this concept, okay, to understand other things. Just keep your knowledge practically by practicing all these examples. Okay, so that's all. Let's connect on tomorrow. And I'm going to discuss tomorrow is runners in the Spring Boot. So it's, I think, last concept of our Spring Core module or Spring Boot core module point of view. Runners is a topic related to only Spring Boot framework. As part of Spring Boot, they given one small feature called as runners. We will discuss that in tomorrow class. And then we will